Good morning. Let's wait 1 minute, a few seconds. I see the people are coming. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on seasonal outlook, which is a seasonal outlook from the European Network Transmission System Operators for Electricity and Gas, so ENTSO-E and ENTSOG. Today, we will present the Summer Outlook 2023, which is coming now, the coming month. From the gas speaker, so we'll have Kasper Zeromski, who is a Deputy Director of System Development. And from the ENTSO-E part, we'll have Lucas Kaldikas, Seasonal Outlook Project Manager. Welcome. And I am Alban Joyot from ENTSO-E, Adequacy Manager. I will be the moderator of this webinar. If you go to the next slide, I will give you just a brief housekeeping rules as you might be used to. So for the questions, we will use the Slido. Please, Mark, don't hesitate to take the QR code at the bottom or the code on the top. Feel free to ask questions during the presentations. We will handle the question after the presentation by the speakers or in a written way. We will also have possibility to group the questions depending on their topics. But we will not have the possibility today to give a possibility to speak. So it will be a written way from asking the questions. Also, I wanted to inform you that this webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be made available on the ENTSO-E website in the coming days. Next slide, please. So basically, just to give you again the link to Slido interactive tool for questions. You can also select or highlight questions you find relevant from other attendants. So you will have the codes here, so don't hesitate. Next slide. Today we will start first with a brief introduction and then present the summer supply outlook from the gas perspective. And then a second step, we will present the summer outlook from the electricity perspective. Between each presentation, we can also have time for questions, and at the end, we will wrap up with the remaining questions and make a conclusion with summary on coming events. So briefly, as introduction, next slide, please. So what is the purpose of the seasonal outlook? So seasonal outlooks, basically, there are summer outlooks before the summer season and winter outlook before the winter season. They are produced twice a year. Here today, we will speak about the summer outlook, but also some highlights about next winter with some anticipations. And these outlooks are prepared by ENTSO-E for electricity and ENTSOG for gas with a coordination as today in this coordinated webinar. The goal is to assess the adequacy situation, to prevent mitigate the risk, and to inform the authorities and also the market actors for the different situations and take actions. Also, it allows to have a transparent approach towards the member states on the European Commission, and we have regular meetings with Electricity Coordination Group, which represent member states European Commission. If you go to the next slide, I will give the floor to Kasper. Thank you, Kasper, for presenting the summer supply outlook 23 and the winter overview from a gas perspective.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Alban, for heading to me. Indeed, today I have a pleasure to present to you a summer supply outlook and with winter 2023-24 overview. A bit more maybe confusing for those who read it for the first time, but we this time present for the first time new structure, new way of approaching outlooks. So what Alban said in his introduction, he set nicely the context to the meeting, to the report itself. But this time we tried something different, something new, and this is actually the output or the outcome based on the feedback received previously. So as you might remember or not, last year was full of events that led ENTSOG to provide additional investigation in the report that we called the yearly outlook. Yearly outlook supposed to cover one full year, and this time, and that was very much appreciated by the stakeholders. So this time we decided to follow the path, and that's why we are happy to present you findings of summer supply outlook with winter overview. If we can go to the next slide, please. A bit of details regarding assumptions. So from the gas perspective, outlooks are connected directly to the storage situation. Summer outlook normally is supposed to answer a question whether it is possible with the given infrastructure, given supply, to satisfy the demand over the summer season and then store enough gas in the storages for the upcoming winter. That's the normal question, and normally withdrawal season in Europe ends in March, and then summer outlook is set in a way that we investigate situation from April, where normally we already see injection season starting in Europe or happening in Europe in a bigger scale, and then we observe along all 6 months up to the beginning of October, or we can as well say at the end of September, when normally withdrawal season starts. We see first cold days in the Europe, and then we see that sometimes storages are starting to be used. So that's summertime, and for the winter season, we investigate period from October to end of March, which is then high demand situations, usually higher demand than summer. Winter season is more or less on average. Demand in winter season is 3 times bigger than in the summer seasons if you look in the gas world, and then we are looking over the winter in a way that we are checking if there is enough supply with the given if the given infrastructure can allow to satisfy demand with given supply and gas that's been stored in the storages. As this time it is overview, we focus on the full seasonal analysis instead of specific peak demand, high demand event. Those will be investigated in a more detailed way in the winter outlook that we are starting soon working on. But for this overview, we decided to look into 2 different cases regarding the demand response and 2 different cases regarding the demand profiles. That is giving us 4 cases in total. So for the summer outlook, we collected demand from our TSOs, asking them to provide forecasted demand for the coming season. For the winter part, we stick to the average demand that was observed over 5 years. And here I need to make a caveat, because those 5 years are not covering previous winter, which was totally different than anything that we observed previously. So here we are talking about a period between 2017 and 2021. Why 2 different demand cases? We have 15% demand response, because that demand response was announced as a measure by Commission. It was announced as a voluntary demand response last time, and now Commission decided to prolong this recommendation, and now this voluntary demand response will still be still on during this summer and most likely for the next winter as well. And that means that in critical situation there is a advice to decrease demand to allow to cope a little bit better with the situation. And those two variants, so average and average with minus 15%, it is as well investigated under the reference winter, which based on average, and on the cold winter, which is the coldest winter ever observed in regard to the demand. Those demand values you can find in our report. So there are tables with demand per country, per month, and this is what we then investigate. We collected capacities of the pipelines to be used in our simulation from our TSOs, and we collected as well two variants. One is capacities, technical firm capacities that they offer at the moment, and in case of full Russia disruption, because here is where the focus is, we ask as well for the enhanced capacities. Those enhanced capacities are capacities when we ask TSOs, can you think about some, I would say, a situation when there would be no Russian gas at all, and how you may work on maximizing flow from west to east of the Europe, so in contrast to what was how the system in Europe was designed. And in that way, those capacities are not firmed, but our TSOs are quite sure that they would be able to offer them for the full season, for the full season, and that's why they provide something different. And as I mentioned, the storage situation is that at the beginning of summer season, we took the storages. So what you can see here on the map and in the table is exact storage level that we took for our simulation. And that table represents April 1st storage levels across the Europe. So 55%, that was very good result, especially in comparison to what happened previous summer, and how we started the injection season. 55% in April is extremely high considering the history, and is giving very good comfort for the injection over the summer. So let's proceed to the next slide. Main findings of the summer outlook, because as I said, in summer outlook, we are having a little bit less scenarios, and we were asking our model whether with given starting storage levels, with given supply and given infrastructure, is it possible to inject those storages up to comfortable level. Comfortable level we set at the range of 90%. So we ask our model if it is possible technically with the given infrastructure to inject to the storages up to 90% at the end of September. And we simulated those two cases with Russian supply as a last resort supply. So more or less the situation as we see right now in the Europe. Right now we still see that there is still some Russian gas flowing to Europe through Ukraine and through Turk Stream. And at the same time, we investigated situation without Russian gas flow at all. And in both cases, it is technically possible with the given supply to inject to the storages up to 90%. With additional filling over October and additional LNG supplies, it would be possible to inject even more. So maybe even reaching 100% in some countries for sure, in some other countries close to 100%. So what we've seen is that the message that we were delivering with the previous winter outlook was well received. And in the previous winter outlook, we were saying, please, considering a critical situation, try to use storages in an optimal way and try to inject as far as you can and withdraw as less as you can. And that resulted in 55% at the beginning of April season, so very high. If we can go further to the next slide, here we would be talking about the winter overview, a little bit more interesting in terms of the output results. And here we see different combinations of different assumptions. Two of them I not yet explained, so let me talk about that as well. So we already covered the demand profile, which is either 5-year average or cold winter. We covered already in our explanation Russia supply, whether it's minimized or fully disrupted. Then we talked whether about the demand response, demand sensitivity. So whether we take demand as it is, or we consider demand reduced by about minus 15%, as regulation says. But then we run two more sensitivities. So actually, no, not two sensitivities, but additional sensitivity, which is we run an additional set of simulation asking ourselves what are the limits that infrastructure in the Europe sets in terms of the additional LNG. So we already see it, and our supply assumptions based on the historical values, and those values are quite high, how much LNG Europe can attract. But as you are aware, last year we were observing some projects being implemented on a fast track, LNG projects, FSRU in Germany, in Netherlands, and in Finland. So we have more FSRU, so floating LNG units that are now in Europe, allowing for more LNG to be injected to European system. And then we say, okay, now we have more. They are located in the areas that, as you as well can remember from the past, we were considering as a possibly bottlenecked if there would be no Russian gas. It was a challenge to send gas from west to east. Now more LNG ships can be delivered to Germany, to Finland, and that will improve the situation. So this unlimited LNG is investigation. It's hypothetical, saying, let's see how additional LNG could improve the situation and whether infrastructure allows for that. And here we have combination of all of that. And winter was investigated with the assumption that it starts on 1st October. 90% of the storages reached. As from the summer outlook, we saw that it shouldn't be a problem. And then the winter conditions for the simulations were set in a way that we said, okay, let's ask if system can deliver gas through the European system and use storages in the optimal way to allow for the additional for still keeping 30% of the gas at the end of the season. 30% at the end of the winter. We know now that it shouldn't be our target. It's not about the targets itself. It is coming from the reasoning that if it would be possible to still have 30% at the end of winter, it means that usually during those cold months, January, February, the gas level would be around 50%, and then 50% is giving comfortable situation if there would be a need to withdraw rapidly a large amount of gas for the peak situation for those cold spells that we can observe. And we see that if still there is some gas from Russia coming to Europe, if there would be normal average winter demand, it is possible to satisfy demand and fill storage and still keep storages at the 30% at the end of the winter season without any specific additional measures. We see as well that there would be a need for additional measure when there would be full Russia disruption. And here we are talking about demand response. That was our measure investigated here in this scenario. And if not, there is a risk of average of dropping the storage level. So it would be 11%. And here we are talking about European average. So you can imagine that some countries with the better supply situation located on the west of the Europe would be having higher storage level, whether some countries in the southern Eastern Europe would be having a risk of having their storages fully depleted. That's why we say, that's why the outcome of the simulation of the sensitivity, demand sensitivity, was that it would be needed in case of the full disruption, and especially for some countries. In case of cold winter, we see that situation would be much more critical. So if still some Russian gas would be coming to Europe, additional measures would be needed to satisfy demand and keep, I would say, comfortable 30% at the end of winter in the storages. So it's either demand response or additional LNG. additional here, we are talking more than ever historically observed. And in case if there would be combination, so of the worst, so there would be no Russian gas at all, worst situation, worst condition, no Russian gas at all, and cold winter, then there is a risk that if no measures would be taken, there is a risk of depleting fully storages in Europe and going into curtailment. This curtailment is around 6 to 13%, depending in which countries we are looking into. We not presented super detailed results as it was overview, but for the future edition, we are already having some feedback that would be interested. So we would be as well looking into that in the next editions. But in case of that bad situation, all measures will be welcome. So additional demand response, additional LNG coming to Europe would be needed to then allow to avoid risk of demand curtailment and keep enough, I would say, comfortable 30% at the end of March. As we say, 30% is not, it shouldn't be perceived as a target. Targets from perspective of TSOs should be as high as possible. But of course, there is a market having a say there, and regulators, of course, there. So that's a combination of everything. I think more or less it's I covered all the tables. So if you can proceed to the next slide, and I will then promise to be brief. Most of the conclusions are already mentioned over my presentation. I will not spend too much time here. So many new infra improve the situation. You can compare the results of the winter overview with the previous winter outlook, with the yearly outlook. We see that now situation is much better regarding to what happened. During summer, it shouldn't be a problem to fill storages at any case, but as UGS, and here it's about storages, UGS is underground gas storages, those are essential for the seasonal flexibility. So it is important to keep that in mind over the winter season. And full Russia disruption, meaning no gas at all to Europe, would require additional measures, especially if winter would be cold. Additional measures here are those enhanced capacities that we discussed already, additional supplies, decrease in gas demand by 15%. Those measures would be needed if there would be no Russian gas at all to feel comfortable and safe over the next winter. Then the next slide, please, because we cover now the summer overview with a summer outlook with winter overview. Only a few words. I will not go through details of that. We, together with Outlook, we published summer review. Summer review presents the past. It's very good to learn from the past, because then we can see how we were able to cope with the situation, how supply situation evolved and changed over the last summer, when we were seeing day after day, week after week, month after month, declining supply from Russia to Europe, and how Europe was coping with it. So total gas demand over the summer dropped by 15% comparing to the previous summer. At the same time, we observed super high gas prices on the TTF, which is the gas hub that is trading in Netherlands. In August, that was peak over the summer time. Supplies from Russia dropped around 50% comparing to the previous summer. As I said, summer is not the highest demand month comparing to winter, but still we saw a decrease in supply from Russia. But that was then replaced by the national production and LNG, and LNG supply to Europe increased significantly comparing to the previous season. So having all of that said, let's go to the next slide, and I would like to, and that's the last slide, I would like to invite you to ENTSOG website when we are publishing dashboards presenting evolution of storages versus what our model gave us when we investigated summer outlook and winter overview. And then you can track the filling levels versus what we simulated and how situation looks like, also in comparison to the past. and more or less check the situation. It's updated bi-weekly, so I think the update that we'll be covering today or tomorrow is coming in a few days. That's it from my side. Thank you very much, and going back to Alba.
Thank you very much, Kasper, for the comprehensive presentation. I see that there are some questions coming. Thank you very much. If you go to the next slide, maybe it will remind the links for questions, and also it's in the chat. There are two questions related to the Russian gas. One about the proportion of LNG, Russian LNG in the total supply from LNG to EU. And the second is what does minimize Russian pipeline supply? What does it mean compared to current levels?
I'll start from the second one. Minimized Russian supply disruption. This is how we set the merit order of the supply for our simulation purpose. So we said, let's try first use, as always, national production. That should be used first. Then let's try to use all other supplies, and then Russia would be used as a last. So it is, from the one hand side, limited by already limited capacity. So as you probably are aware, there is no flow through Nord Stream, there is no flow to Europe through Yamal pipeline, but still there is some capacity from by Turk Stream or through Slovakia. So in our model, we minimize those capacities to reflect the flows. But anyway, we then are measuring then putting Russia the last resort, and then we are checking if we can, with the given context of the simulation, survive without Russian gas at all, or in some specific cases, if it is still needed, or then how to replace it with specific measures, as I explained. So that's what means Russian mean. And another question, I have a good memory, but rather short. So the share of the Russian LNG in total LNG supply to Europe. In our simulations, we are here a little bit more agnostic about that. So in the simulations for winter outlook, we treat LNG as a global market in a way that if the Russian gas would be banned, or there would be a situation that it will not be delivered to Europe, then it could be replaced by any other LNG that is over the global market. About the share itself of the LNG, we don't specify this in our outlook, in our simulations.
Okay, thank you very much. There is a question, clarification about the minus 15% of demand, whether it is related to the EU regulation and voluntary reduction.
Yes, exactly. So we wanted to make our simulations a bit more meaningful in a way that we stick to something that is now as a regulation, and I would say putting some obligations on the member states. So indeed, it is to mimic what exactly is set in the regulation. Regulation says minus 15% comparing to the average of the last 5 years, excluding this one last year. And this is exactly how we define it in our case. So it is minus 15% of the average demand.
Okay, thank you, very clear. Maybe we can take a last one, and then we will switch to the presentation of electricity. The worst case scenario, you mentioned curtailment would be applied. Is it in all EU countries, or is it in some of them? So
this time we were not specific about that in our report itself, because to be precise, it is better to have actual capacities and actual, I would say, situation verified by our TSOs. As it is 1 year ahead, the certainty was a bit lower. Well, now we know, of course, that our stakeholders would like to know that. In more details, we'll definitely improve it in the coming editions, but it's definitely not in entire Europe. But we can see that as it was coming from the previous analysis, previous outlooks, some countries are in the zone that allows them to fully cooperate. So infrastructure is not setting limits to the cooperation, and then those countries can cooperate fully. So then they can even share the demand curtailment and or avoid demand curtailment if possible. They do it all together. Here when we see 6 to 13%, that means there is one zone that is potentially 6% curtailed and another zone that is potentially curtailed 13%. I don't have exact result in my head as we not publish it in the report itself, but usually it is Southern Eastern Europe, because then we were observing some technical limitations to fully have this area connected to the rest of the Europe to allow for the full cooperation. And usually that area is a little bit more curtailed. But here, I would say 6, whether 6 or 13, this is still within the range of 15% curtailment demand response discussed. So we were not super specific about that.
Thank you very much. Yes, so it's about the most sensitive part of Europe is Southern East. Thank you very much, Kasper. And I propose now we will switch to electricity. Some Outlook presentation by Lucas Galdikas, the project manager of Seasonal Outlook at ENTSO-E. Thank you, Lucas. I give you the floor.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for a nice introduction. So my name is Lucas Galdikas. I'm project manager at ENTSO-E, working on the seasonal adequacy assessment project. And today, I have this pleasure to present you our findings and the results on behalf of the whole team who worked extensively on this project. So I'm very eager to proceed further on. So first slide is just a reminder for everyone attending, or maybe it's something new for some of you. We display here a wide range of various ENTSO-E products, which are basically addressing different time horizons and for different purposes. But today we will be focusing mainly on the seasonal adequacy assessments, which take a look a few months in advance and try and assess its adequacy situation in that time frame. Nevertheless, adequacy monitoring is an actual ongoing process, and we are taking efforts already a few years in advance, and then we are refining our assessments. And this is no other case for the seasonal adequacy assessments, which are being refined and later on closer to the real-time operations, namely in the week ahead, and more if that would be needed. So the results today presented are based on the information a few months in advance, and TSO community as a whole is, of course, continuously refining these assessments whenever it's needed to refine our insights. So moving forward, the first slide specifically on seasonal outlook is actually our approach. And here it's probably just important to mention that we start with this step 1, where we assess the expected adequacy under the normal market operations. So without taking any exceptional measures, assessing basically the risk that the TSOs may need to take some extra measures to cope with the adequacy risks. And from this step, we basically identify those probabilities and extents which might be needed. Then we move on to step 2. We then assess the what would be the contribution of the dedicated non-market resources which are available for the TSOs to be activated whenever there would be adequacy risks. And we try to assess also the residual risks after those activation of non-market resources. Also in this step, we consider the European cooperation, meaning that we consider that in case one member state would be at risk, the other would be supporting it if there would be enough of a interconnection capacity to provide an additional supply from these non-market resources. And then last but not least, of course, we have an ad hoc investigations where we try to understand the risks, what are the key drivers behind those risks, and this really adds additional value for TSO community, and we believe also for you to understand those risks and what could be the driving forces behind this. In any case, maybe before moving further on, I would say that there are some non-market measures or these operational measures which TSOs might be able sometimes to take into account if the risk would actually materialize, but those are really depending on the operational conditions. And as an example, I could mention a voltage control, which sometimes could be utilized, or maybe re-optimization of the cross-border capacities to have more import capacities from the borders with more resources. But these are more as an operational measures which are not being assessed here, but the TSOs would be, of course, utilizing those if there would be ever a need, and if those would be viable options. So speaking, finishing about our approach, and now proceeding to actually how the summer looks like according to our data set, and what we see as a result. So the first slide is just a brief overview of our input data set, and it shows rather common trends as we have seen already a few years in our assessment. So for point one is actually that the renewable generation capacity is expanding quite a lot. And here on the left-hand side of the screen, you see the bars with the expansions only during the summer period. And so namely June 2023 until end of September 2023. So it is not an annual evolution, but it's only a trend during the summer. And we continue seeing this renewable generation capacity increase already for a while. And at the same time, we see no or a small decrease of the thermal capacity generation, which is in principle composed of the fact that the hard coal and lignite generation is continuing decreasing in Europe, whereas gas is compensating that decrease to a certain extent. Maybe an important remark is to say that this is a pan-European picture, so it might be not a valid point for every single country, but overall in Europe, we notice this trend that the coal and lignite generation is decreasing and the gas is compensating to a certain extent. Further on, we also present a picture on the planned outages of the thermal fleets on the right-hand side of the screen, and it also shows a quite regular trend that from the beginning of the summer, the planned outages tend to decrease towards the mid-summer when the electricity consumption tends to increase, especially in the southern countries, and the utilities try to prepare for that moment. And then towards the end of the summer, slowly the planned unavailability starts to increase, because in autumn there is another preparation period for the approaching winter season. So rather a regular trend on both topics in the expansion of the generation capacity and also on the planned unavailabilities in Europe. Having this information, of course, we proceeded to our simulations and adequacy assessments, and here you can see our results. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the results of our step one assessment, so under the normal market operations. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see results after the activation of the non-market resources. The bubbles present the magnitude of the risk in the terms of relative expected energy not served. Basically, it is just a normalized value so that we can compare the bubbles between the countries. And what we can see here is that we see the risks under normal market operations in rather those remote or isolated systems, mainly islands. And here on the screen, you can see Ireland, Malta, Cyprus, and Crete, which have no or limited interconnection capacity to continental Europe. And then With the green arrow, you can see that the risks are decreasing in Malta after the activation of non-market resources, as that system is relying extensively on these resources, especially during the outages of the interconnector with the Sicily, which can contribute quite a lot with the supply. Said that, these are the results which we see at this moment, and of course the situation is continuously being changed. And as at the very beginning, I was telling the situation is continuously being monitored by the TSOs and regional coordination centers, and the adequacy assessments are being refined continuously. In the following slide, I have an additional insight of the risk. So here we show two things. On the left-hand side, in the boxes, you can see our identified key drivers of those risks. And then on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see an evolution of the risk throughout the season. So you can see that in some places like Cyprus or Malta, the risk tends to increase towards the mid of the summer. In some other places, the risk remains quite low, like in Crete, and they are rather flat throughout the season. Whereas in Ireland, we can see also that the risk increases towards the end of the season, which is, of course, very valuable information for us. And when we analyze more in detail these results, we see that high unplanned outages plays a huge role behind those risks, whether it would be generation unplanned outages or interconnection unplanned outages. So this factor is very important, and TSOs are, of course, monitoring it continuously. In addition to that, these high unplanned outages are typically combined with other unfavorable operation conditions. Like in Cyprus and Crete, we really see that unfavorable weather conditions plays a huge role, especially when it drives demand up, and when renewable generation remains low, then the system is really stressed when combined with the high unplanned outages. In Ireland, we see the same trend that aging thermal units with high unplanned outage rates put an additional stress for their system. And during these moments, they're relying on the wind generation. And typically, if the wind generation is high, there are no substantial risks in the Irish system. Nevertheless, if the wind generation is not that favorable, the situation is or the situation has to be monitored very closely. Maybe I will stop on Irish part, and toward the end of the season, we see this increase, and some people may start thinking about why it starts to increase there. And it could be explained mainly by the planned outages scheduled in Northern Ireland part of the system, specifically around that time, which just then reduces the extent to which Irish system can rely on imports from that direction. And last but not least is the Malta's risks. As I already mentioned, the system relies really on non-market resources. And what you can see in the light blue line is the risk before activation of these non-market resources, and in the dark blue is the after activation of these non-market resources. And what we can see is that really these non-market resources in Malta really addresses or those challenges related to the supply balance, and they should be sufficient to cope with any possible challenges coming summer. So with this slide, I conclude the presentation on our findings for the coming summer. I see that also we are quite tight with the time, so I will try to be brief, because I would also like to present our anticipations for the coming winter. So for this topic, I believe there are two slides, and I will begin with the first one, is that for the winter 2023-2024, we anticipate really similar but no exceptional new risks for the coming winter. Of course, we remain vigilant and monitor energy sector evolution. So in case there would be any drastic changes, of course, we will take this into account into our winter outlook adequacy assessment. For the moment, we identify that the most prominent factors which we would really closely monitor are hydro reservoir levels, or in general hydrological conditions in coming months, which would have, of course, impact on how well the reservoirs will be prepared for the coming winter, as well as nuclear availability in Europe, or more in general, the thermal availability in Europe, but the main emphasis is put on the nuclear availability. So we will be especially monitoring this one. For the moment, we are still discussing, but we are really strongly anticipating to create a sensitivity on demand reduction for the coming winter and to see the impact of this scenario in Europe. So this is one of the sensitivities which we keep in mind. Additional sensitivities might be defined in coming weeks as well, especially if there would be new factors emerging in the energy sector, as I just mentioned, that we will be very closely monitoring. And actually, even your feedbacks and questions in this webinar are also very useful, because we also take some inspiration from these questions and your remarks as well. In addition to this, we will do a critical gas volume analysis again for coming winter, as we did it for last year. And this analysis essentially just assesses how much of gas is needed for the power system to ensure adequacy for the coming winter. We did it already last year, and we are really eager to do this again. First of all, of course, for us to understand how much gas we need. And second, we also want to inform all stakeholders, whether it would be policy makers or ENTSOG colleagues, or even a public audience, to really communicate about this. Nevertheless, in the following slide, there is additional contextual information on the situation, or the anticipation and the picture which we have about the situation in the gas system, which was already presented by Casper a little bit before. So I will not stop there for too long. Before I move on, just a small announcement is that ENTSO-E is striving always to publish seasonal adequacy assessments as soon as possible. And for winter outlook, we are really committing to publish it in early November, so that everyone be informed as soon as possible. So this concludes our anticipations for the coming winter, except the picture on the gas system. And this is really the last slide on the anticipations for the coming winter, which presents the situation in the gas system. And the gas supply remains really a key factor for electricity adequacy. However, TSO community is rather optimistic about the prospects in this regard. First of all, because there were a lot of discussions last year about the importance of the gas supply for the power system needs, with all stakeholders, with the ministries, with the European Commission, with ENTSOG, even internally between the TSOs, and everyone is much more, let's say, aware of this topic and prepared for exceptional situations already, just because of the preparatory work which was done last year. Second point is something what is presented in the graph on the right-hand side of the screen, the expected evolutions of the gas storages. And what we can say is that ENTSOG is presented results were quite positive already, that we can prepare for the coming winter, and we take it as a positive sign. And then afterwards, of course, we need just to follow how the situation in the gas system would look like and make sure that we are reflecting that. So overall, the situation looks quite optimistic from this regard, from their results and their projections. And second point is also that in the dots, you can see 3 dots of the last year's gas storage levels. And as we see this year, they were filled by 60% in early May, compared to the previous years when it was filled at around 30-33%. So it's already suggests a quite positive sign. And ENTSOG colleagues and in their report highlighted this, and Casper already presented this so far. So despite this rather optimistic picture in the gas sector, ENTSO-E will yet proceed and perform a critical gas volume analysis just to make sure that we know how much gas is needed and that everyone is aware of those needs for the power system adequacy needs. And with this slide, I think that's it. I really thank you very much for your attention and for the opportunity to present these results, and more than happy to answer any questions if there would be.
Thank you very much, Lucas, for this presentation. Yes, so we have some questions. We have only a couple of minutes left in the webinar. There are 2 main questions that were popping up in the recent minutes. One is about whether an extended period of drought and the risk of drought is taken into consideration. And the second, non-related, is about the modeling of Ukraine.
Right, very valid points. Of course, the drafts are included by default because our adequacy assessments are probabilistic. So we assess a wide range of possible weather conditions, which include the dry and also wet hydrological conditions. And it, of course, goes beyond the hydrological conditions. It includes a wide range of the temperature, renewable generation, conditions, and many other factors which may have an impact on the power system. In addition to this, there was a question on the modeling of the Ukraine. Of course, the situation is extremely difficult there. So we didn't perform an analysis either focusing or including that part of the European power system. So we purely focus on the possible supplies within, let's say, continental Europe, and try to avoid speculations on how the situation could evolve in the Ukrainian power system. Of course, we remain in quite close contact with the Ukrenergo colleagues, and ENTSO-E TSOs are supporting Ukrainian power system to the extent which is possible.
Thank you, Lucas. One other question is about the specific challenge on nuclear availability. As we know, it was an important topic in the last winter. Can you give us a bit of insights where we are now about this?
It's progressing, I would say. There were, of course, a lot of the corrosion inspections being carried out last year, and it had a huge impact on, let's say, nuclear availability, and also for the uncertainty before the winter of how the winter could look like. And for this reason, we had a range of the possible scenarios for nuclear unavailability last winter. For this summer, the situation, at least it's more certain. So we have a one central nuclear unavailability scenario. Nevertheless, the main uncertainty remains on what would be the unavailability for coming winter. And for the moment, the situation can depend, of course, based on the ongoing inspections further on, especially in France. And then depending on these findings and the evolutions in this domain, we will build a winter outlook adequacy assessment as well. So if there would be any need, we would of course establish relevant sensitivity scenarios to make sure that the results are insightful for all stakeholders and our public audience.
Thank you very much, Lucas. I think it's time to wrap up. I would like to thank all the speakers, and we have also two wrap-up slides. Before that, to inform you that the slides will be published on the ENTSO-E website soon, and the recording as well of this webinar. And of course, the summer outlook is expected in the coming hours right after the webinar on our website as well from ENTSO-E. Related to ENTSOG, you have also their summer outlook, which is already published. So as a summary, this gives you an overview of the system, both on electricity and gas for the security of supply in coming seasons. And yes, we are, as you have seen, we're anticipating next winter, which is in the view of gas and electricity here, most constraining than the summer in average. And we will keep you updated. And if you go to the next slide, we would like to inform you about upcoming events. These two events are on the electricity ENTSO-E side. The InnoGrid event, which is about innovation. You can register still on our website. There are two sessions on the 9th and another one on the 14th of June in coming weeks. Another event is the webinar on the European Resource Adequacy Assessment about the methodological insights. The European Resource Adequacy Assessment is somehow an assessment similar to seasonal outlook, but in a longer term perspective, with a dedicated specific methodological insights on the economic viability. So you are welcome to register also to this webinar that is will be on 13th of June. That is for now. Thank you very much for your questions and for these interactions. Normally, you should have in both reports plus slides the additional insights on the details. Should you have any further questions after all, you can contact us, ENTSO-E or ENTSOG on our website. Thank you very much. Wishing you a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.